slow. Так що ми маємо приємність гостити Марію Капаєву, яка приїхала на симпозіум. Це події, які трошки пов'язані теж з симпозіумом, але з іншою фокусом. Ми не говоримо про документування війни, ми будемо говорити сьогодні трохи про спадщину, тому що подія є у програмі, яка називається «Плетива спадщини», «Weaving Heritage». So, and I think it's a good, like, resonating as we'll talk about textile plant. So, we'll see where it will take us. І ця програма великою мірою є про багатоетнічну спадщину, але також про якусь складну спадщину, або таку, яка вимагає думання, приглядання і роботи. І таким великим обшаром є радянська спадщина. І у випадку Марії ми побачимо, як можна працювати у іншому контексті, але з подібними викликами, пов'язаними з великим індустріальним об'єктом, великою приміщенням, яке мало своє 19 століття, життя імперське, радянське, і що там є зараз. Так що буде про Нарву, але не лише. Марія є в Естонській академії мистецтв. І, якщо я можу сказати, поєднує і мистецьку, і дослідницьку шапки, тому що робить докторську дисертацію зараз. І нещодавно тільки відкрила велику виставку «I'm a Buddha» в Талліні, то ми також розпитаємося про це. Сьогодні ми будемо слухати про проект, який стосується кремгольської мануфактури і ширше про твою мистецьку практику. І, можливо, так, потім поговоримо про між історією і мистецтвом. So, the floor is yours, and we are looking forward.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Sophia, and the whole team, and having me here. It's such a pleasure finally to visit Lviv. I really enjoyed the whole week to be here. Yes, so I will show you and talk about how I work with the histories as an artist. And using kind of a sample, one body of work which I developed from 2014 to, like, the exhibition was in 2017, but the book published in 2020, so it's like a few years. And that's usually how I work. I do lots of research and produce different kind of works with different mediums. So I'm originally from Narva. Narva is the town sits right at the border with Russia, and then, like, very briefly kind of give you context of myself. Then I have first economics degree. I worked in the office for some years. Then I ran away from all of that and to UK, and where I studied photography. And this was kind of beginning of my becoming an artist. But photography felt a bit of limiting me, so I started to use different other mediums, not just photography. But I always get back to photography, especially, like, I know more in terms of it's always exciting medium for me in terms of, like, true, false, document, not document, kind of and accessibility of it. Like, many people have photographs, especially in the past. So. And that's, I guess, how I work. And so 6 years ago I got back to Estonia, and now I'm there at my own studio and just, doing PhD, as I said, and practice. So the project, I'll get back to the title, why it's called this way. Dream is wonderful, you're unclear. And it's It's basically 150 years in Narva. There was a textile mill called Krenholm. Krenholm, it comes from the name of the island which you see on that image, which is just a tiny small island on the river Narva, which serves as a border between Russia and Estonia. And actually some of the factories were located on this island or on another parts of Narva, but a lots of housing during the Soviet time, or like I think even before, they were on the Russian side, but actually before the 1940, between 1920 and 1940, it was all Estonia and both sides of the river, but then Russia occupied and never returned this part of the lands on the right side of the riverbank. But it's a huge complex, so this is just a couple of images. And in 2016, I was invited to be first artist at the Narva Art Residency, which you see top 4 pictures, top 2 pictures. It's also part of the property which used to belong to the factories. It's it's a 19th century building which used to be a house of technical director, and that's where the Narva Art Residency is located. So, and they are quite open actually to collaborations and to work if somebody interested. More than welcome, and they're doing even open calls, so you just can approach them and talk to them. And that's in 2016. I did most of the works. Even 2014 I started it, and what I made the slides is I'm gonna show you some installation shots of the final works which I've done, and also how these works are transformed into the book. This is the book, so you get a bit of idea differently how, because for me the book is not a catalog of the exhibition, it's like it's extensive piece. I included more or differently some pieces of work, and how it's all in a way started. Let me see. So my both parents used to work for the textile mill, and pretty much most of families, somebody had to work, and over generation it was even kind of a people's proud if different generations work at the mill. But then in 1991, when we regained independence, it became clear that the scale which extended during the Soviet times, this mill, it's really hard to sustain for Estonia as a country. So in 1994 it was sold to the Swedish company in Borås Weavery, and they bought it promising not to close it down, but they pretty much start to closure from straight away. From 96 there start to be, they start to cut and fire the people. My mom was one of the first people being fired as the best worker. Her manager said the best has more chances to survive. And she was a designer, and I'll get back to that, and it was cotton production. So it's from the cotton, which cotton quite often came, during the Soviet times, came from Uzbekistan, and then it's 7 factories of different production process, and the final is even a sewing factory producing some items. And my both parents work on a finishing factory, which involves bleaching, coloring and printing, and my mom was designer of different kind of, for different fabrics, different purposes. And then eventually it was announced bankruptcy in 2009, and so, but majority of people who lost, it's about 12,000 people who lost the jobs in the first 10 years. It was catastrophic process. The government ignored that for a very long time, and it was almost too late when they start to create some kind of supportive social programs to support the ex-workers, and that really affected the Narva town, because I don't think it ever recovered from that. So lots of people start to leave the place, and because it was Kreenholm was quite a cold town in the town, because it's 12,000 workers, but the population was about 80,000. So you can imagine it's like pretty much everyone's work there. Like there were a couple of other big enterprises, but not as big as this one, like power stations and some other. So that's a kind of a short story. And when I was already living in UK and kind of start to get the art as a sort of method of exploring and thinking, I was immediately thinking I would like to do something about that, because what I found frustrating is that the old narratives, what comes about Kreenholm, they were talking about the periods, name important directors or owners, but they never talk about workers. And as you all know, textile industry is the women's dominated industry. So for me, kind of was a big sign that these women are about to disappear because they're getting older, and we haven't recorded anything, what they think of that, how this whole transition time was for them, what it meant for them to work, what it meant to lose the job, and how they found what to do after. So I really wanted to give create something to give the women's voices somehow recorded. And that's what in 2014, with the help of Narva College, which is a part of Tartu University, they helped me to give me space, and one at that time lecturer, Karel Vannemelder, was helping me to kind of scanning, the same as you do, scanning things but not taking the originals. So I threw all local media, radios, everything, newspapers, word of mouth from my parents. I invited former workers to come and talk to me, and I invited to tell whatever they want to tell about their life during the working at Kreenholm, plus bring some photographs what they have in the family albums which they identify with that time. And in the end I don't know, really 600-700 images, like digital copies, and I was absolutely overwhelmed. I just put myself without knowing what I'm doing. I never did oral histories before. I think if I would be, my interviews would be heard by oral historians, they're totally failure. But then there's something really happened. During these interviews, I really understood how much I connected to that community, how much I know what they're talking about, how much I'm part of it. Even I was like a child, a teenager, and I never worked with it, even I visited my parents' exhibition. So I kind of faced the dilemma, like to, in a way, represent them one or another way, but also I'm not historian, and I will not be able to create any historical exhibition. I'm still an artist who would like to create some artworks which one or another way talk about, maybe sometimes even through emotions, talk about what I collected. And that's how it started. So the time at the residency really helped me to be at the space, work on what I have things. And lots of things are actually ended up, I produced some work based on the one small story, as this one is The Bright Way. And I don't know how much, if you know or know, there is like in 1940, there is very well-known film called Svetly Put, like The Bright Way, which done by Alexandrov and played the starring Lyubov Orlova, who was favorite actress of Stalin. She's on the left, and this is the movie is like a Cinderella, Soviet Cinderella, where like this literally dirty peasant woman become to be a successful waver and even member of like what is called parliament or whatever in the Soviet Union that was called. So why I took brought my attention to that movie, because one of the women who I interviewed, when I asked her why she decided to come to work to Kränholm, and there was a lot of migration also happening, labor migration from Russia to Estonia for work, but I'll talk a bit about that later. So she left her hometown, and for I don't know, hundreds of kilometers she came to Narva to work. She said she saw that movie in a cinema, and she wanted as the main character dancing scene between the looms. And then she said, well, of course that's not how to walk a waiver, but she said she still actually in the free time found dancing clubs, and I met her when she was 80 something and she was still dancing. So that this kind of propaganda picture really stuck with me, mesmerized, and I decided to deconstruct it and look at it. So I work with a performance artist who is on your right, Maria Kapajeva, and we shot the video in response to the film in the empty spaces of the Kränholm. So they are now all empty and closed. I mean, you can, through the excursions and like for residents, for example, you can visit them. But so, and I'll show you some extract just to get an idea of how I did that. Oh, okay, that doesn't work. I probably have to. Sorry, it's probably switched back to that. Yes. Let me try again. Yes. So I have to see the back, not the front at that point. Yeah? Did you get it? So you come to here, you turn to the back. Yeah. Totally, like, yeah. And then look on the side. You can imagine, not on the side, you have to imagine like everything what you're looking now are your rooms. You're looking again like that. So everything okay? No. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Okay? That's the scenario. Okay? You're still walking there. No, you're not stopping, but you're kind of like, maybe like sort of stepping, looking, are they all okay or not? But you're walking dynamically. Yes, yeah. No, just a bit, yeah, just to look in most of it. Yeah. Don't walk forward, just kind of, yeah. So anyway, and this is where it comes to the title. So the song what is you hear, it's a March of Enthusiasts, which became very known hit during the Stalin's time. But what I interesting found the story behind that is there is one line was censored quite straight away. It's still original in the movie, but when some other people were like singing it in the radio or whatever in the concerts, the line was changed, and this line was "Dream is wonderful yet unclear." So the officials will seal this doubt and this unclearness, what everything is clear for us. So, and I hold this phrase for a long time where I was developing this work, and then I understand this title is actually unites all my work so beautifully. So I decided kind of to use this line as a main title of exhibition in the book. And but I still was really liking this idea about the clearness, unclearness. So I created the sculpture, and as I don't know how it's in Ukrainian, but in Russian, yasny is also refers to the light, So I created this lighting sculpture which is consistently blinking like that. So it's like you have like it's clear, sometimes it's unclear. So I was just playing with it. And then in the book you can see it starts from clear dream and it finishes with unclear dream. That's how like I work with a young ever designer, and it was really a beautiful collaboration how we transform my works into the book. Then there's the cutbacks. That was also when I came to Narva residency and I had access to all these buildings, and I was also first artist at the building. So in one of the cellar I found 5 of these 1980s, like it's a fiber-based prints, huge, like 1 meter to 120, Soviet posters which were exposed outside of the building, like sort of, it's clear like sort of celebration of workers and the machines. And the owners of the buildings, they allowed me to use those for my work. So, and it took me a really long time to understand what to do with them. And actually, I've done really harsh work. I cut them, and I cut with the knife, like with the sculpt, like the figures off. And I hand painted this kind of default Photoshop background, which is, for me, was more referring and thinking about like that it's replaceable people, because a lot of people who I interviewed, they were talking about how individuals, they felt as individual workers, they lose their value. It all becomes about profit, like when capitalism starts to come. So it's like machine matters, people not, and I was kind of trying to reflect that. And I just want to point out, these are colleagues of my parents, both. But these are different kind of machines. And then, and I repair also a bit and cleaned all these posters because they were in a harsh. And what I like about them, to look at them in the surface, you can see a lot of damage. There are also some stickers or scratch someone's names. It's like the result of already probably post-Soviet time, how these objects are survived. So for me, they are very valuable as objects, not only just as a picture of that time. And what I did in the book, what I did actually with the figures, I did not obviously threw them away. I glue them to the pieces of white paper, but I tried to glue them in a way like in a similar parts where they were in the photographs. And this work was sitting unshown for 10 years. I never showed these figures until actually a week ago. I'm part of the Boras Art Biennale. Boras, exactly the place in Sweden where the company located who bought Kringholm. And this is an exhibition where I connect the stories of Boras and Narva together through these earlier works and showing these new works, new editions. So, and that was really good. What I also like about these figures, how they're fragile, because it was impossible to cut it as one piece, so I have to almost puzzle them in a different kind of pieces what I was cutting. And they also become to be in this kind of white void on a piece of papers, still being present. And this is my like from phone snapshot of the on the Boras because I haven't done yet proper images. That's how they've been shown. And then referring to the number of people, the scale of this meal, I've done a piece which calls 12,000, referring to number of people. One of the women who I interviewed, she worked on the control department when the fabric runs, and they had the different stamps to mark the defect. And then after that, other workers like cut out this way defect. And she gifted me one of the stamps. They were different kind of stamps, but one of the stamps she gifted me is the Soviet logo of the Kringholm mill. And I decided to do 12,000 stamping for each kind of, for this biggest number of workers what were on a piece of cotton fabric. So, and it's precisely 12,000. What was interesting for me, I thought this work is very conceptual, And when I show it, the first exhibition started this journey in Narva, because I wanted to show it to the community first. I was thinking this is too conceptual for them to understand, and maybe it's like hard to relate to that. But even at the opening, I observed accidentally the scene where like 3 women were standing right next to it, and one pointed, they're saying, "This is you, this is me, this is you," and it was like just my heart was totally broken. I felt like I maybe thought less of them, how they can understand this idea. I was really touched by that. And what was interesting with the photographs, what people brought me, it also took me at surprise. I didn't know what kind of images expect, but actually majority images were group photographs. And then analyzing a bit of process, I understood what was happening. It's either when the photographer comes to photograph even one person for like article, I don't know, you know, these heroines, whatever, best workers. The group who work like this collective, they gather very quickly together inside the photograph, and then there was mostly one photographer, like been working for the meal. And then he printed the copies for many of them. And or there was some kind of, somebody get retired, and also they have, because sometimes the pictures like with the flowers, person holding, or I don't know, something, but it's a group photographs. And these are for me became very interesting. I'm still thinking of them and recently wrote about them as a kind of speaking of this migration and how the Soviets you know, create the settlers, the community settlers. That's what's happened in Narva, that the local people after the World War II were not so much allowed to get back, but they replaced the Narva city inhabitants with this labor arrival. So they were announcing actually the Krenhorn jobs across the whole Soviet newspapers. So people travel because people were desperate for jobs, for places to live. So lots of people travel to Narva to start kind of their working life there. And for me, talks a lot about this kind of settler politics of the Soviet Union and I mean Russia. And what this group photographs, I was thinking about them, is they start to be replacement for these people of their families, of their communities, of their roots, what they belong. So it's through the labor, there was a kind of like artificial families and communities forms around the working, around the labor, around the factory. And that's why maybe these images are especially valuable for these people, because they have no other images of family gatherings, so what happened then before they kind of been moved to live in Narva. But what I did, because there was such a big amount of them, I decided to create installation and a bit repeating that method of figures in a space. I cut out figures from some of the group photographs and placing them where exactly they were in the group photographs. So it's kind of become to be that the women or like people, the men also, it becomes to be kind of in this void after the whole factory like collapse and start to close down. So people left on their own to find the ways to survive. But it's also something about this individual, so you start to see not the group photograph, but the individual personalities and personal stories. And what I did with that, I decided to create with the slide projector installations. And so there is 4 slide projectors which continuously runs, and I'll just... So I really wanted to recreate that a factory kind of a feeling. So these machines are working, and it's like non-stop. There is the sound, almost like a looms, like a working with that. And interestingly, with the local specific community exhibition, this is the room where the people, former workers, spend the most of the time. They were standing and looking, and they try to recognize anyone, and they keep on going, and it just like, and sometimes they see themselves. So every one person who came to me in interview, I made sure that their group photo with them present is included in that projection, so they are there, because obviously it's like hundreds other kind of. And then together with the projections, I created kind of a community narrative. I tried to figure out what to do with all these interviews, and I recognized there are so many like similarities, experiences and stories, but as individual voices, but they all talk about like losing this community, what they feel really nostalgic a bit about, not a bit, but quite a lot, this kind of, and for me that was in a way like not the artistic approach what I decided to do. I created the kind of a narrative starting from after World War II, when these people start to arrive and how their work started being trained, or how they talk, we kind of rebuild in a city, etc. And then to the kind of end of the closure. And they all like this different kind of alliance. You can hear it's different voices, but I try to create a bit of sort of a narrative from that. And also give a space for the women's experience specifically. This is different kind of way of installation that was in Vilnius done, how like just to show. And this is what in the book, it's radically looks different. That's what we Jan Evert came up. I didn't want to like bring the slide projects, it doesn't make a sense to have it in a book. But then book is opportunity to show as much as I could from these materials what people shared with me. And so we created this, if you look at it, it's like this a fabric of continuous ongoing group photographs. It starts with the least number, 2 people on a photo, and it finishes with the biggest number on the one photograph of different times, it didn't matter. And then I also in the book included these stories, this one by one on each page, and I included much more than it was an exhibition. And it's in 3 languages, the whole book is in 3 languages. And it's like half of the book is just this. And I think it's what it does to me is like if you look at it and read, you start to get a bit overwhelmed with the scale, how many people, there is more and more and more, and they not really repeat. So it's like for me that was the way of showing the scale of for the community, for the town, how it was. And then I opened an exhibition in 2017, but just 1 week before, I was really thinking I wanted to take another group photograph of people who would come, and also print out and give them this copy. And also that was a bit of reason to bring them to the exhibition, invite them, so they could come to the exhibition and pick up this photograph. And this is what I did, is 160 people came. It's actually right next to the Narva Art Residency. My both parents are still there. But what I also wanted to do this photograph, not just this photograph, but also on this specific place, because behind them you will see that used to be like the most modern entry to the whole complex of the buildings, to the mill. In that space, I was inspired by Harun Faruqi, who has this, who had this installation, 11 videos of workers leaving the factory. And if you know, the first ever moving image was done by brothers Lumiere. It's in front of their factory, how the workers from their factory leaving. And Harun Faruqi is talking about this transitional space. It's a space where, I don't know, like a waver become a mother or sister or wife, and this kind of transition. It's this one space. And for me, because it's all community in transition from the kind of Soviet to capitalism from all different kind of stages, to retirement, to whatever. I really want to document also people and the space together in one, and that's what I did. Yeah, and I have on a website this short video. I also together video recorded that, and there's like short video of making them. They start to sing the song without like planning. After I took pictures, and the piece of song of that comes to this with a short video as a kind of document of the process. And what is interesting happening now in Boras, this is how I show it. I was thinking how I can bring the community. Boras in Sweden is also used to be the textile industry center in Sweden, and they also eventually went through this whole closure when the textile industry moved to China, India, and left the Europe in the end of 20th century. So there are also big communities who could relate to that kind of stories. What we did with the curator, Taro Elving, and the Textile Museum where it's exhibited, we left a note there inviting people to bring their own photographs and of the group photographs from their past and place it underneath of my photograph. And the museum picked up, that was at the opening, museum picked up a few images already from their archive to set it as a sample. And I really hope that it's going to work, so we'll see what's going to happen in the next few months to connect the communities. One of the works which you see on the tables and as an exhibition, but it's much more interesting to see it in a book. It calls like Diaries of a Textile Worker, and this was almost like a piece what I was in a way missing through my conversations with women. It was really, really hard to talk to them about women's life at the mill. They somehow, I think there's something about, I don't know, their representation themselves. They were talking about sometimes, yeah, it was really hard, it's much harder for women than for men, but then they try to not talk in more details. And then one of the women who I met up a few times, at some point she told me she has this actually diaries, but you know, diaries not like writing your thoughts, it's more like this calendar diaries, like this diary. So, and she gifted them to me. First she borrowed, but then after that she said, I don't need them anymore, I still have them. That was exactly for me the sample of this internal life of every single woman, like that represented. Besides them being just beautiful as objects, they contain the information, how much you earn, important dates, how not to get pregnant, how to lose weight, recipes, poetry, like how to stitch the clothes for children. Everything is in that. What's the women, like every woman lives on daily basis while working. And also sometimes she did some collages from Polish magazines, which was also interesting. But this, like for me, this is exactly what they never were able to talk to me, but that represents in that document. And so what we did in a book and an exhibition, I selected some of the pages, and then we obviously translated them, but it's again like offering the viewers just to kind of to look and take it as you want of that. And the reason why she didn't want them back, because when I gifted her a few copies of the book, I told her like, I'm ready to give you diaries back. She said like, why I have already a book, so. But I'm keeping them, I'm waiting actually some right moment to find where I can donate and preserve actually this, the same as digital copies. It's hopefully you'll find the way. I'm not rushing it. Then there's one piece which is something comes to my personal connection. In a way, that's how it maybe started for me also to think about it, and it calls a failed rapport. And wrapper has two meanings in design, textile design. It means the design which repeats. So on the fabric, and the wrapper in psychology also means kind of mutual understanding. And what I did, when I was a kid, I obviously observed how my mom does the designs, and I also wanted to be, of course, designer as my mom, and I did one of my designs, and I really tried to like probably do like this repetition, this rapport. But what kind of happened when I gave it to my mom said like, of course it's not going to be printed, and that was like child drama, a disappointment. But and I preserved that drawings, even most of my drawings I threw away at some time of my life stupidly, but anyway, what I found that's interesting, this is the perestroika time. What I found interesting, I'm not drawing flowers or beers, I'm drawing very specific heroes who I still remember in the late 80s how we went to cinema to watch Mickey Mouse, because there was no on the TV possible, went to cinema, and that probably blew mind of my child kind of imagination. And so it was very interesting how this kind of the Western culture entered already in me without knowing me. So I'm drawing these characters from Disney, not any kind of other characters. And that's for me is like beginning of transition or something. It also represents, it's not just about the child dream to become as a mother, which failed, but it's also something what is projecting to us and how it's affected without acknowledging it. But then for my exhibition, when I was like framing it, and I was thinking, what the heck, I'm artist, I can do whatever I want now. So I decided to print this fabric, and I stitched like a skirt which I was wearing at the opening, so making my dream come true and having the fabric with this. Yeah, even I cannot do mass production because probably will be sued by Disney, but just for myself I can do that. Yeah, and then comes to my mom. I have ongoing, I was thinking what I could do, because we have in the family there's the albums of her designs, like I don't know, 100 or something of them, more. But I decided to go just with one design, and which is you see on the cover, and pick up something very simple, most like you would say innocent. But that was also for me this thinking about how in the Soviet times this apolitical, all these designs, and how it's possible with them talk about politics. And I pick up design which I could recreate in a one stamp. So this is, I have this stamp, and I decided like to start stamping it on a different kind of balls, whatever comes opportunity or related to the exhibition or not. And in that way, like mapping my mother literally in different places, but also kind of recording that. And it started from one wall in the Narva art residency, which is still, to my surprise, still stays like that. But I think they refurbish it now, they might do something with it. But for 10 years it was there, because I look at this wall and this flaked painting, and I just suddenly saw the map. And that's how I decided. I started the first I did with the white paint, but then afterwards I shifted to the gold to bring a bit of more value to the design. But this was, I stamped basically where the latest layer of paint was flaked. And it was very interesting. Some people, when they come, they were saying, so you like to remove the paint and you saw your mom's design underneath? And I kind of said, well, not really, but I like to kind of play with it, and I guess that's also helped me to give this idea about mapping and continue that work can exist beyond just only one wall. And for example, this I want to show in Latvian Museum of Photography what I've done, the wall with my mom designs, but they have on the other wall preserved the hand-painted wallpapers, because it used to be like a living house 100 years ago. And it's very interesting, all photo exhibitions, what happening there, they try to ignore that, and they just like to show somehow it exists there, but never kind of connected to the exhibitions. So I decided to connect that the story of the building with a bit of story of my mom design. So I used the same colors for the paint the wall, and then kind of stamping on the wall, create kind of a new temporal wallpaper, which is in a connection and a conversation with that building wallpaper. It's just a small gesture, but I like to do something like that sometimes. And then what I did, like just because I have this exhibition opens in Boras and Narva, this is my another way of connecting two towns. I decided to stamp the map of the both towns. This is Boras and this is Narva, and connect them through this kind of a design. Even it's just a kind of one line, but it's a symbolic, but it was something I wanted to bring attention to both cities who went maybe through kind of a similar experience. And then in one work which I decided to show in Boras, but I never showed and never actually fully developed it when I was developing Narva exhibition. It's the video work which I title now They Come After Us. And this is I shot in 2016, but I only edited it now. It's a short video, and it is actually demolishing of the factory where my parents used to work. And my both parents haven't been, I mean, my dad passed away already, but they both never visited that place. For some people it's very painful. Many former workers, they don't go to the territories. They don't want to see it's empty, it's too painful for them. So, but when after, it's very interesting through the process after 10 years, looking at what I was recording, I start to see something else in that, not just about, maybe even nothing so much to do about my personal connection to this building, but it's something else. I think I'll show you just a bit of the beginning of it, but it's short. really mesmerized by these machines, which look like some kind of creatures. And that's the title came, is like, they come after us, who are they, who are us, what is happening, and kind of maybe more looking at the bigger already context, not just specifically Krenholm, that meal, but something what we do in this planet and what is gonna happen after. So, yeah, and then I think it's last or something, like, I want to say how this work, like, including like this video, has continuation. In 21, when I was already back to Estonia, there's a group of young people in Narva. They went to this kind of competition, and they won a competition to do a few murals in Narva to kind of, they wanted to make it a bit brighter, the city. And then we met, I don't remember how we was connected, so, and I proposed them not just to do murals, whatever, like pretty images, what if we do murals based on the Krenholm designs? And they really supported that idea. I also managed to raise a bit of money. And what I did with them, it became of educational kind of process. We went to the Narva Museum. We were introduced to this huge collection. It's like thousands and thousands of designs. We looked, we all collectively tried to select one. We obviously were narrowed down what we can do technically in terms of the mural. And also we will narrow down what we had very short time, what spaces we could get for free to paint those. But we managed to do that, and it was really exciting experience. They're all kind of high school kids. They all now in the universities already, and very intensively, like many different young people and local people came. And it was like during the week we did 3 murals, and they call themselves art revolutionaries, so we all signed them. And what we also did, we signed, if we knew the authors of design, we signed it that it's a Krenholm design and who is the author. But the thing is, with these huge collections, they quite often they know who is designers, because in the Soviet time they never identified. Narva Museum did a good job. They tried to invite all designers who still living in Narva, ask them, and literally, like as my mom did, look and point out, this is your design. And sometimes they know each other designs, but it's too many of them. And we ended up selecting 3, we didn't look at the authors, we ended up selecting 3 unknown authors. And then I went to my mom to ask, maybe she recognized them, these designs. So this is the one. And they're still on the walls of Narva. This is the second one, and it happened to be my mom's, which I didn't know. And this was also very cute. You see the building behind that, this is actually a living house. And the living house, with the flats, the community approached us and say, we want you use our wall. Please do that. And they also came, who live in their flats, they came to draw with us, which was really nice. And it's like really big wall. So, and that's what ended up happening to do my mom's design, which was not planned. And this is the first design, and in front of it, you can see it calls Krenholm Garden. This is one of the projects which Narva Art Residency runs. They have it in front of this wall and in front of their building, 2 spaces, where it's like this urban community garden. There's different artists coming specifically working with that, and there is also community grow some herbs and vegetables. So it's kind of this dynamic space. This mural is a bit hidden from the public space, but through the art residency, it's kind of accessible and visible. And that's them in one of the days. That's it, I think. Yeah.
You may have some questions and comments.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we can do it in English, so that would work. Thank you so much for taking us to your city, to your town, and also to the story. And I personally find it incredibly exciting how it's something that is very private, also very local, with the specific community, also the way you connect it to other places. I think that with this large phenomenon in history, like industrialization, big plants, and then how they become an element of these big structures which don't exist, and how you reconnect them into others, right? Other map in a way, and how the stories which are local become translocal, right? And how you could find, because there are so many of these places here, and that's actually probably might be the first question, how this reception was definitely different. So you showed it where you showed it, because you mentioned that you showed it in Latvia, Lithuania, Sweden,
yeah.
and in other places in Estonia, or only Narva? In Narva. So it's kind of how the reception worked, and which themes were triggered or like activated or inspired by the story you tell. And if you would think about showing it on other, because Narva is also a very specific place, each place is specific. But if you would like to show it in Estonia, in other places, which places that would be, where you would like to show this, to tell the story, basically. The book is there, but the exhibition is a whole very different setting. So and then we can collect some of the questions. Like comments also.
The way how I work, it's in Latvia and Lithuania. I show it as a whole exhibition. Pretty much all these pieces were exhibited, so it became a sort of traveling exhibition as such. But I show some of the pieces separately, and this is where quite often curators, like if they approach me, will find something, and it becomes to be part of conversation with other works. So that's what I also like, that it's not stays like fixed at the one body of work, but it can create much wider conversation through including in the group exhibitions about some other contexts. But I think this work is always needs, in a way, as the audience, the community, and maybe it's harsh to say, but community of loss. So it's something what used to unite them, but not anymore. And quite often it is the industry, it can be some kind of industry. So quite often people relate to that through some of this my work. I think the brightest experience I had with this exhibition was obviously in Narva. And that was really interesting because the opening, it was actually a really funny experience in a way. I was nerve-breaking, I was totally I don't feel myself in that moment. But a lot of former workers came, a lot. And then there was a bus organized in Tallinn for all these art people who came for the opening. It was part of the also Tallinn Photo Month Festival, so they did really good job to bring the people and announce it. And that was two totally different crowds met in one space. The art people immediately says we've never seen anything like that before. They were seeing some kind of people who they never see at the exhibitions. But what I have to say is a bit generalizing, but it's for the sake of kind of a sample. Art people quite a lot just made their circle and left the building. The former workers stay to till we close the doors. They stay, they look, they talk, they look again, they touch. they talked to me, quite a lot of them, like even who I never met through interviews, they wanted to talk to me, so, and share their stories. What I also did, I didn't say, when the book was published, and it was published right in the middle of COVID, and I wanted to do the book launch in Narva, and I gifted the copies to everyone who I interviewed and more. There's like a bit of Krenholm group community, I gifted them books, like libraries, etc. But I gathered in this Narva residency, we set them in a circle, and even my mom stitched the masks with that pink color, and I stamped them all because everyone had to be in the masks. I have some pictures, I think, on my website. And what was interesting, I wanted to create kind of this shared reading, like we're going to read this page by page, some of this extract, it doesn't matter who said that, the stories. But with them specifically, it's transformed, like they were reading that, and they were like, some of them immediately saying, yeah, but in my experience, or I wanted also that, and this immediately transformed into sharing even more their stories for how it is important for them. And it was also something like special, and in a way they appreciate that, and maybe like be a bit visible. And I think I would not like lie if I say after my exhibition, this, like let's say Krenholm women's community, like as such as like a group of women, they become to be invisible. They start to be invited to different art projects and something, so start to be more involved, more people start to come, they knew how to approach. It was wonderful for me why before my exhibition nobody even questioned, like they are so easy accessible. Why nobody even wonder, let's interview them. So it did some change which I wanted to change. So I did not do a job as a historian really, like to preserve it like as individual maybe stories or something. I have the still oral recorded interviews, but it gives them agenda, and that's what I wanted to do. And that's why for me maybe showing the work I did was most challenging. I was really scared as a hell, but it was most rewarding. And other places, yes, there was, because of in the places where I showed, there was also this kind of their own histories, different kind of textile industry, some others, and people could relate to that as well. So there is always something, one work better than others, depends on the context, yeah.
Context differs, so we have a chance for different questions. Ira,
yeah, thank you so much. This is really so impressive and so interesting how you worked in so many ways with different communities and different audiences, and how people really became engaged in the sense of also co-creation and really kind of cooperative with you. But I also would like to ask if you somehow came across kind of negative perceptions of art connected to post-industry, because from my experience, so many of the people who worked at big state-supported industrial enterprises, they are very much negative about closure of the plants and factories, and obviously for them, kind of further artistic development is not something which they really dream of, right? So for many of them, like a continuation of a real production would be rather an option. How do you think, how is it in general possible really to show that art can be a tool for this heritage to live on? Or how do you in general, if you ever come across this kind of people who do not really kind of want to be engaged with artistic kind of representations of their experiences?
Thank you for the question. It is the conversation about bringing back the productions is all the time in Narva. I think until the people leave who used to work in that is keep going, even them would tell him how hard it is, how it's damaging to their health. and everything, but that's why I meant they have this nostalgia about that time, and mostly for me what I saw, it referred to the nostalgia of community rather than hardship of the work in the textile industry. So there's all the time there is always some people who saying like, oh, bring us back jobs. But I think it's also because of Narva residency, there is a lot of other artists also happening, doing different things, and people participate. There start to be more understanding that what function of art in a way, it's not really to offer the jobs and recreate, but talk about it in different ways and bring attention to it. So some people appreciate, some people not, but it's always the case with any kind of, especially contemporary art. What was interesting for me in the interviews, and that came from the reflection, like what Karel Vannemelder, who was lecturer and helping me, he was like sitting next to me scanning, is happening when the people start to come and I start to have conversation with me. Karel quite quickly in the first, second day, he says like, it's only you could do that. He immediately saw like, the thing is, Narva grabs all the time attention. In 2014, because of Crimea, actually, it grabs a lot of attention because the Narva was immediately positioned in the Western media as the next. So, and because of the border, like, consistent conversations, because of the Krenholm stories, the people quite often says that there is some foreign journalists, whatever journalists, can be Estonian also, but foreign, they come, they grab our stories and they go and nothing changes for us. So when I came and they suddenly realized I'm one of them, because actually a few of them came because of my surname. They said like, I used to work with your father or mother and I never met them. Their attitude was very different. Their conversation to me was very different. And I was immediately telling them, I'm not a historian, I don't know what I'm going to do. But I went through like quite a long time this pressure that I have to do something for them that please them, but I'm artist. So that was the most difficult part for me, to find the balance between them. But as I said, I found the exciting ideas they share with me, looking at my work and conversations we had, they are went beyond of my expectations. So I think people can much more be engaged with contemporary art if you talk to them. And that's what I think sometimes the contemporary art institutions are missing. To have a conversation explaining and engaging, then they start to relate to that. And obviously in this case they could relate quite a lot because it's part of their stories, and that helped. I don't know if it answered your really question, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if I may also pose another question, because I also did the research in a similar borderland context, but in the Western Ukraine. And what I found very prominent in my sources, but they go mostly from 40s and 50s, so like very initial period of Soviet power coming here. And what I found was very prominent in the sources is actually how diverse workforce was, and even after Holocaust, when Jews died during the war, still so many of these migrants, new migrants who came here, they were also very different backgrounds from different republics of the Soviet Union, also like Ukrainians from the east of Ukraine, and then local people who stayed in the city or who also came from the villages. And I found it especially interesting how they built certain kind of relations between themselves, and often also hierarchical. So, for example, there was a strong kind of promotion of locals, because there was the idea that they should join the Soviet project and be very active in really engaging in different initiatives. But also what I found very interesting, how this differentiation between men and women in terms of jobs and positions they occupied, So there were a lot of very skilled and well-educated women, mostly newcomers, who were like on really quite high positions, and also and mostly, for example, men, they occupied positions of those who actually repaired the machines on which only women worked. Because I also worked with a case of tobacco factory, and it was the same. Like once again, you have these women who are very much dependent on men and how quickly and efficiently they will repair your machine, and especially in this post-war context, it was like so important. And I found a lot of tensions and a lot of harassment connected to these hierarchies and very different educational level and different backgrounds and also different languages. And I would like to ask if in your context, which is also borderland context, if you come across this kind of stories of like social tension and conflicts, and if they found some, I don't know, representation in your work, or you decided not to highlight them because they can be also instrumentalized, unfortunately, by the contemporary politics. So did you really work with these darker sides of multicultural character of the borderland?
No, unfortunately, because my focus was not at that time. I even didn't know what to expect and what the piece of like the top of the iceberg I'm touching, because there is so much more. Even like I wasn't able to grasp the geography where people coming from. I mean, it's recorded on that, but it was feel like I cannot really represent on exhibition through like 30, 40 interviews to represent geography of the whole thousands community. It needs much more research work. And I think this is will be vital and important work to do. And how it is. What my focus is about like the women's labor, is to see what's the difference between men and women in that hierarchy. And it was always very interesting to hear that women like talk about it. It's like by default they don't even question that the men quite often take the leading positions. They take in these masters, as so-called, together with repair is a kind of also the field of men's job. But somehow always, if the man is present, it's always his opinion and position is much more heard and valuable than the women's one. So, and when some couples came to have to interview, it was impossible to talk to women about their like women's experience, because the men immediately dominating, and women feel intimidated. They feel like I'm asking to private, in a way, leading the conversation. So it is there are of course hierarchy, which I just vaguely observe in terms of like working class differences. Because when the waivers is like seen as a working class, but also I have, including like my parents who are with a higher education, and some people came from the management of the whole meal, not the managers, they never came, but somebody who was like in like middle sector, like a few of them came to share. Their stories are very different and their perspectives. Some of them talk much more about politics of the meal, transition of economically, when the waivers is talk about retired at 55 and then what you would do and how their health is damaged. So it's very different stories. But I try to bring them together to give equally voices to both, not to dominate one or another. So, and I don't know if it's right decision was or not, but it was also, I was thinking about that, it's almost like requires another work to focus in on a class division, on focusing more on the geographies and then ethnical differences, because there were obviously different representatives, so to say, ethnical groups who came through from the Soviet territories who worked there, and how this relationship built up. They were a lot focusing on talking about this, what is called, it's like, I forgot the word in any language. It's basically like that one more experienced worker taking care of the younger workers, like a trainer. Yeah, like this, something like that. There was very like implanted by the like Soviets structure of how you run the mill, of that, and this is also very interesting. I would even do research specifically on that, because this power relationship was never about like learning the working skills. It was also a lot about how morally you behave as a woman, if you're married or not married, whatever kind of happened in your private life. It was also in a way discussed and controlled through that system. And that really fascinated me, how it's all, they quite often in the interview say it's like I think in my book it says like that's the collective which could honor you, but it also can criticize you. But for me it's like this phrase is exactly about that. They quite often, what's happening in your private lives becomes to be collective. And that's what this whole difficulties comes, which they never discuss, and hierarchy comes. But there's also some support also comes. But as I said, I see it as definitely really help to this kind of settler politics, when the people feel without elder generation of the families been there, then this nastavniki or somebody comes and make that role. So it's a such fabricated structure made to support the whole basically production and labor, cheap labor, and what is like, and getting the product done, yeah, through ideology, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sounds so relevant even, I think, to the 19th century historians.
Yeah, so some things are Soviet and some things are from a little bit before. Yes, it's very much an industrial story. I mean, it's also a chance. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question. How did you decide whom to invite for interview? Like, did you invite everyone? And how was this kitchen of communication with workers? I understand that your parents worked in this factory, but still, how was this kitchen of communication with other people?
I mean, I invited everyone who I could. As I said, like I interviews in local radios, local newspapers, announcement, like really with the photograph and everything. And then because it is my parents' community, we share the word, and I knew already some people, so inviting them, so whoever would come, there was not like my selection. Whoever come, it was set up like the address in this Narva college, timing, and then with some people I start to meet up more individually, I start to meet up again, or they will recommend it saying, well, you can also talk to my friend, my former colleague. A few women, I went to their houses because they were not in that shape even to ready to come to the Narva college. It was kind of far walk for them. They were quite old, and so it's all kind of, and there was no my selection at all. And actually, like a couple of colleagues of my parents, yes, came, but didn't even come. The colleagues who I thought they're gonna come, who knew me personally very well, but somehow they didn't come. But some people came, as I said, like they were immediately acknowledging, saying they used to work, they remember my parents, especially my father, who probably were more connected to bigger group of people working. So it was like all this random. I did not really, I mean, I couldn't force anyone, I didn't really invite, so I tried to, and there was like twice I did it in different times, and then across this few years I was meeting on and on, And then people continue kind of contacted me and they wanted to give more, wanted to give me fabrics and more photographs. But that was what we earlier talked about, you have to, because I'm not even a museum, I'm not even able to keep that all, so what I do with that. But it showed demand, it showed, and also space for researchers, actually. There is so much could be still talk with these people about and get more to specifics, to nuances, some like of this part of their life and experience. Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, Narva, it's also, we do hear about Narva, yes, it's a border city, it's also predominantly Russian-speaking city in Estonia, so it's not only about industry,
Yeah.
so we're not only talking about loss, but there's losers, it's kind of like this also story that people, because of the lost job, but also not being a part of the mainstream or not being a part of age, so it's how you feel. A lot of grievances, but also a lot of discrimination and feeling like forgotten, right? Yeah. So there's this frustration, and how did that come in the conversation that you had, and then also, is there, as you talk about these places which are settled, because Estonia was such a big, important border in general. Like it was not a border on the down, it was like a frontier of the Cold War, and there are these places which are like capsules from all of the big Soviet states. And this, how the project like yours, but also how, is there a dynamic of how that changes, because time also goes by. Some people move, some people, I don't know, some people die, some people move, some people find other ways. So how, how this exclusion and connection also works to the way what is Estonia is reconfigured, in a way what is Estonian, how this local and more larger collective is, more related, or there are more relations there, and something along that line?
It's a very big question, very, very big and very complex. I think, of course, there were some bitterness about, the many people in the community feel left behind by the state, by the city, you name it. And also I interview and talk obviously with the generation who it's not many of them who work after the Soviet Union. It's usually they start work in the Soviet Union and being also kind of with this ideology of Soviet ideology keeping in themselves. The younger generation who worked, and even like maybe even in the early 90s start to work there and work like to 2000s, these are people who were still young. I'm talking about even their 40s or something. They were young, left, and they left quite often. They left Narva also to looking for other jobs. So the people who stay in Narva, it's mostly this retired people with a bit, some of them with this kind of Soviet mentality in terms of being offended, like, or being left behind. And that's where I also think this nostalgia is coming from. It's partially like because of that. And it is in a way like transforms because new generation grow up. Even Narva does face in that the young people leaving, and actually the town population is minus 1,000 people every year. So and we really, the Narva really struggling to bring and keep young people there, because there's maybe not so much jobs, but also the intensity of the politics all the time around that, and obviously with the full-scale war, it's intensified even more. So it's quite difficult, but there at the same time there are really like I know people in 30s, 40s, 50s. I would say like this younger generation of Narva who are like in the best sense patriots of Narva, and it's quite also interesting. They quite often might be patriot of Narva, but not necessarily patriot like of country or something. But they really do lots of work and for communities. They change in the landscape and creating what they do and build what they build up for the communities. So there are also people like that and who grow up. What I think the most kind of difficult part is about the belonging, because as I said, these people came after World War II. The quite big percentage of Narva population, people came from some other places, and they see it as a Soviet kind of propaganda. It's really relate, like that's what in some other work I did work about Mariupol. It really relates to that. I could so resonate with Mariupol story because Soviets first bombed Narva, they destroyed, and there were a lots of buildings. It used to be very medieval, like beautiful architecture. If people were comparing it more beautiful than Italian. And there were lots of buildings were bombed, but they could be reconstructed. But the politics of Soviets, they decided, no, we build up new world. We don't need these memories we raised, so they demolished all of that and they build up. Narva mostly looked like the Soviet blockhouses kind of town. And when these people arrived, they was said, we rebuilding the Narva. That's what they live all their life with. We actually came and we rebuilt. But who destroyed that? They don't question it, or it's too hard to question, even they know the answer. It's too hard to face it because then for them there's no hope, right? And so it's very difficult. And then their generations, their children and now grandchildren, who exactly maybe in these 30s, 40s, they brought up with the same kind of ideas, and these generations even more don't have any other home. They have very big idea that their grandparents come from, I don't know, middle of Russia, Siberia, from somewhere else, but they have no connection to that. So for them, this is home. They have no place to go. And then when it's clashing with whatever passports they have, with what kind of Estonian idea of what it means to be Estonian, it doesn't fully fit to what they feel. So that's where the kind of clash is coming in terms of belonging. And in a way, this is my recent exhibition, I'm a Border, because I'm talking exactly about this, being from the borderlands, what it means. But it's from my take, from my histories, which are a bit different. Yeah.
Because it's like kind of like a little bit, and then we go, so because in the 90s, or at least what we are hearing, it's like this, you're Estonian or Russian-speaking Estonian, and like, two categories generalizing. And of course, if you start like looking, things gets more interesting. But still, these are two poles of the, and then how over, it's time, it's already 30 years, right? It's more than 30 years, and people intermarry, people make choices, people, go to school, and time brings change.
Mm-hmm.
How that's, what happens on that spectrum, because whether this categorization even is working, like Estonian, and
it's working and it's not. It's a political tool to polarize society for different reasons. For one reason, as Russia did, bring attention to Russian speakers who are oppressed, or to the same as like quite some narrative as like that Russian speakers not able to learn language and they worthless, or something like towards Estonians can be something else. So it's for polarization, for bringing the conflict intentionally. What is happening in the middle is actually lots of people learn Estonian, live and work, do as much as they could. But I think everybody forget, not everybody, but many people forget. We talk about like, okay, Narva, it's 95% of Russian speakers, and that's it, that's almost like a start point, the story. But for me, it's important to say why it is. Because even these people, they forget. It's because of that, bringing the labor and artificially create this Russian-speaking community, reducing the value of Estonian at all. When I was in a Soviet school, obviously. We learned Estonian when I was, I think, in a elementary school. We learned this like how to count in words like mother, father, and that's it. And then I started to learn when we regained independence. I was 15, and suddenly I need to learn Estonian to the university level because there's no higher education available only in Estonian. So that was huge gap. And what is happening? Unfortunately, it's a few from what I see. I'm not expert aspect. Is that this migration, labor migration, what happened, plus industry which collapsed. It's all these factors together, they create this social crisis, which was not really supported much by the government and make it more easier for the communities and more integrated into the rest of the country. So even like the younger people who now go to the schools and learn Estonian, the problem for them, you cannot learn Estonian if you don't hear that. And that's what is the reality of Narva. You have to get out of it to learn. As soon as the kid go into the university somewhere else, they immediately learn. Like my niece she didn't go high school in Narva, she went like in a South Estonia agricultural like kind of college. She learned Estonian in 1 year. She could freely speak, and her even attitude toward Estonia at that time really changed. But this like how to change that, reduce this amount of Russian speakers there. It's like that's what 30 years they try to sort out, but they cannot. And it seems like very, very difficult. And then it becomes to be more and more this political card to use. Pro against whatever games politicians involved in whichever country actually. Yeah. Yeah.
But still, things do change. People
Yeah.
do travel, people do go somewhere, learn, and it's also the question of generation. Because certain, it's like if it's for the first generation, it's we rebuild it, but for the third generation, it's a story, right? And then you can get into conversation and try to maybe open. What was before that, and let's get
but
a
it's
different
also,
chronology into
but it's also
question.
part of the educational system because we had Russian-speaking schools until recent. So, and that's what, to be honest, to my opinion, that's the worst place. It's like, it's so good, it needs to be done 30 years ago to remove the Russian schools because that's where creates segregation. This is where it starts, for me. And then the kids who didn't manage to learn Estonian good enough, they get segregated more and more afterwards as grown-ups. And I understand also Estonian government, not specific government, but the state, they try to be loyal, so to say, to the biggest minority, like Russian speakers, to let them to have education in their mother tongue, but that's led to that kind of the biggest big conflict, internal conflict, which we are facing now, and very difficulties for people to integrate. It creates a segregation, which I think Estonia closed their eyes for a long time, but it became obvious in case too. Yeah.
You can close time for some time, and then it's really like what you did with bringing the artsy group from Tallinn and get even for some time to the same room and mingle. I think it's important. It just takes a lot, and it takes a lot of this type and other type of activities, and maybe hope that they can work or not, we do not know. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for coming. We will have these beautiful books in our library. So
Yeah, I wanted to say the 3 books.
Yeah.
This, I just want to say that this is my first book, which I designed myself. It's based on my father's photographs in 60s, 70s, and Italo Calvino texts from If in the Winter's Night a Traveler. And this is my more recent, but it's textbooks, and actually it's published in 3 languages, but I didn't bring you Estonian, so I thought maybe you would be interested to have in your
So that's a whole different topic. We are not opening now because Maria was you were a lot in Narva in 22, and that's Narva is a very important place, not only for history of Estonia. It became an important place for the history of Ukraine, as it will be. So thank you. Дякую, дуже дякую. So until next time.